Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is Many a TrueNet, and welcome to the January 2017 Patroncast, and this month it has been January. Oh, January is fun. Let me tell you about January. Let me tell you the story of January. It is a fun story, which is a few things all kind of fall together, which is, some of you may know have been kind of around for a little bit longer. I have 6 nieces and nephews. I have 6 nieces and nephews. I have 2 sisters. I have 3 children each. And those nieces and nephews are all kind of like, some of them are just approaching teenage now. They're all pretty young. But they're all now of an age where they have opinions, which is really annoying. Because like when they were babies, you could just get them like a coloured thing, whatever. My favourite thing was always trying to go out and find the most like obscure animal in fluffy toy form, so that I could, just hand over a ridiculous toy that made no sense when no one even knew what it was. I enjoyed doing that when they were babies. It confused my sisters immensely. But no, now they're old enough to actually have like opinions and preferences, which is unfortunate because opinions and preferences are often way more expensive than just a really, really obscure sea creature in cuddly toy form. So like the oldest, my nephew, he really likes Lego Technic, which is great. Lego Technic's awesome. It's also really expensive. Like a nice box of Lego Technic, not a huge one, just like, it feels like just like a medium box of Lego Technic. It's like £50. And that's one of 6 nieces and nephews. So Christmas ends up being fairly expensive overall. If that's expensive for everyone. Everyone spends a lot of money for Christmas. But when you've got 6 nieces and nephews, it gets pretty expensive. Then January rolls around when the ad revenue in YouTube just completely collapses. So you don't really earn anything off the ad revenue in YouTube in the month of January. Then at the end of January, that's when the UK government sets its deadline for you submitting your personal tax returns for the previous year. And technically, I'm actually self-employed because I work for myself because the YouTube channel is my job. So as a result, after you basically spent a load of money in December and made no money in January, the government says, oh, by the way, you owe us a massive check. Please send a massive check by the end of January. So, oh, fine. If you'd asked me for this in October or November, I'd have been happier with it. I'd have been less grumpy about it. But you've picked a really, really bad flipping time to ask me for a big pile of tax money, government. Thanks. But yes, I won't dwell on the ad revenue question. To be honest, January's done pretty much exactly what I expected it to do, which is views are actually pretty high. The views in January have been great, but, the ad revenue fell 40-50%. So, we've made about half as much money in ad revenue in January as we did in December, of pretty much broadly the same number of views, give or take, which is what I expected pretty much. I've heard worse horror stories. I saw some people saw 70% falls. So 50% fall, it's not great, it's never easy, but it could be a lot worse. And it's not a thing to panic about because of Patreon, which is fantastic. And incidentally, hello to the new Patreon people, because if I've got my timings right, I'm also going to put something out on the main channel which actually acknowledges the existence of the Patreon, points out and talks about why it's important. So I have actually finally bitten the bullet and actually acknowledged the existence of Patreon on the main channel again, which I probably haven't done for over a year, so isn't that fantastic? January, in general, actually January was a really interesting month. I came to some conclusions, never play Overwatch again. Never play Overwatch again. You know what? It was fun as a novelty. The Overwatch placement matches are hilarious just because of how many flipping dislikes those got. Those hang on, let me go and find these in my list of videos here. Oh, lovely. 10% dislikes. I love 10% dislikes. That's not that high, to be honest. Many people get much, much higher. But yeah, they didn't get great views. They didn't get great views, and 10% of the dislikes were actually dislikes, which is very, very high for us. Clearly, people were just not that interested in that sort of thing. And yeah, by the time the actual tournament rolled on, I actually thought they had a really fun narrative to them. That's what I kind of did the Overwatch videos. I thought it'd be really fun to kind of do the placement matches and then show off the practice session, then go into the tournament as the grand finale. I was really hoping I'd be able to build some hype for the tournament, but that just didn't really happen at all. By the time the tournament rolled up, it got way less views than the practice, which is unfortunate because I think the tournament's kind of a joke video, obviously, but I thought it was a quite good punchline to the setup in the practice video. So, you know what? We've learned a valuable lesson. Clearly, I think a lot of people who really like Overwatch, yeah, that's probably the problem, to be honest. You've got 2 groups of people. You've got people who don't watch Overwatch, so therefore, for them, it's probably a bit confusing because they don't really know what's going on because, unless you've got at least a working knowledge of, what all the different characters do and what all the different game modes are, which is hard to kind of, paraphrase entirely while you're playing, then you're not really sure what's going on. Whereas if you do know Overwatch pretty well, you were probably just cringing through the entire video because I'm so bad at it. So arguably maybe it didn't really have much of an audience, so never mind, Overwatch probably won't be back. Which seems I really genuinely enjoy playing Overwatch, but clearly people don't enjoy watching me play it, so I don't think it'll return. Rome Total War continues to do ludicrously well. 80 Days, that was a pleasant surprise. 80 Days did really, really well. And Expeditions Viking started off okay, like the first part did great, but then it did the thing that many things that are fated to never become series does, which is like the viewership for the second part just completely dropped off a cliff so much. You just know, therefore, it can't become a series. Which, say, something like 80 Days didn't really happen so much. So 80 Days, I don't know, maybe 80 Days will be back one day. But Expeditions Viking is, that's certainly done, I would say. Got some really cool strategy games coming up this month, by the way, coming in February. Just by sheer coincidence, a few strategy games I'm interested in have just been kind of lining up and coming out recently. Diluvian is out next month, which is kind of like, it's a submarine game. Like, it was described to me as like FTL, but submarine. It's not really that much like FTL, but like I can vaguely see where the comparison comes from. It's an interesting one. I just recorded that today. It's pretty good, but not spectacular. So that's kind of be coming like next week. And I just got code for Realpolitik, which is like a strategy game. Like, it's a bit like Democracy 3, I guess, except with more of a map, and I like having a map. One of the things that's really interesting is it's a contemporary political game, so it's kind of got like, like a Total War style, like world map, if you like, but it's more like Democracy 3 because it's all about like economy and diplomacy rather than about like micromanaging individual armed forces. Because it's set in the contemporary world, it's actually got Islamic State as a country on the map that you can actually like look at and interact with and stuff, which is really weird. I find that so odd that like it's an actual world map with actual borders marked for Islamic State. That's so weird, but it's in the game, and I'm going to be kind of looking at that. It's only the demo version I've got, because it doesn't actually come out for like 2 weeks, but I've got the demo version now, so I'm going to be having a little look-see at that. And then, one that actually has already come out, I think it's come out anyway, I'm pretty sure it has, but I just hadn't got around to it yet, House of Many Doors, which looks a lot more like FTL than Diluvian did, even though both were described to me as like FTL, but, which is kind of like, yeah, FTL, but like really dark and weird and surreal. It looks really beautiful, actually, so I'm kind of looking forward to all of those three kind of showing up over the next few weeks. February is also going to be a really big changeover month as well. That's kind of what I'm nervous about for February, because February is the point where, by sheer coincidence, 3 fairly big long-running series are all going to come to an end, or very soon afterwards, which is Fallout 4 Survival is pretty much done. So I'm bringing in a new Fallout 4 series and taking that down to 1 video a week at the end of this month. Probably be about the week commencing the 20th of February. That'll probably come to pass. And then we're going to do the old challenge that Matt did ages ago that I'd love to do in more detail. Because Matt, if you recall, like a long time ago on a live stream, and I was actually there, and me and him talked about it a lot, did the kind of low-level Nuke World run. Because you can go to Nuke World like at any time you want. Like, just because the radio signal only kicks in at level 30, you can go anytime you want. So, I kind of want to do it at level 1, because Matt did it like level, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 or something. I can't remember when he actually got there. I would like to do it as a challenge run, where the rules say you have to be level 1 when you actually reach the Nuka World transport hub. As long as you're level 1 when you hit that transport hub, then the run's legitimate, and then you have to beat Nuka World like that. I think that sounds really, really fun and interesting, and that's why I've kind of skimmed through Nuka World in my actual survival mode playthrough in the past few weeks. It's because I kind of want to do Nuka World in more detail like this. I think that's going to be a lot more fun. Because the problem with survival mode in like its current series with Grills Bears is it's got too easy. The problem of many Bethesda games has kind of reared its head, which is, the problem always is, they can be very hard in the early game, then they get manageable in the mid game. By the late game, you become an unstoppable powerhouse, you can just murder everything. In kind of the mid to late game, you become too powerful if you just kind of vaguely know how the game works, and that has kind of pretty much been what happened with survival mode. Like, the survival mode stuff that it added did slow that down happening. It stayed difficult into the mid game, but now we're kind of up to level kind of 60s, 70s. Like, at that point now, it's become pretty simple. So I feel like it's kind of lost its tension. The series has kind of lost its purpose. Like, I've been enjoying the Brotherhood role-playing. That's kind of brought a bit of life back to the series. But I'd like to do Nuka World, rather than just kind of go through it with Grills, I'd rather like to do it with a new character who has to start at level 1. Because that is seriously nightmarishly hard. I think that'll be a lot more tense. Because, for example, like, I won't have Light Step, or rather the Light Step equivalent in, I think it's Sneak 3. So the mines and the tripwires will all work. Where most people, when they're going for Nuka World level 30, will already have Sneak 3. So, like, loads of the traps can't trigger, whereas I think this is going to be a lot more interesting. So we're going to be kicking that off. Mass Effect 2 is coming to an end in just a couple of weeks, and once we're done with that, that is going to be, well, that right now is going to be when Skyrim begins. I still haven't flipping finalised the rules, to be honest. Right now I think it might just be master difficulty with no bows allowed, and I'll kind of go for like a mixed mage and also sword and shieldy light armory kind of person. I don't know, I might go for something like that. Like, it's going to be more of a chill series, because like I can't do like a serious hardcore challenge run in Skyrim, because simply like the reason I can do those in Fallout is because I just know Fallout and the mechanics and the way the world works so well. Skyrim for me was always more of a casual game. Like, I've played a fair bit of Skyrim, but like Skyrim for me is more like a game I turn on occasionally and I just like play for a few hours, and typically I'll just kind of, I'll start a new character, I'll do Helga, and I'll go through to Whiterun, I'll kill the dragon, and then maybe I'll go up and meet the Greybeards, but shortly after that I'll just kind of wander off and I'll probably get bored and I'll stop playing that character, I'll never play it again. So, I know the early game really, really well. As we go further into the game, I know it less and less and less well, and I think I've only actually played to the end of the game once. So, like, I think it will be an interesting series, because I absolutely love Skyrim. I think it's wonderful. But I'm hoping it's still going to have some of that freshness of discovery in it, because I'm going to be finding lots of stuff I don't know. But I think I still understand the mechanics well enough. I'm not going to frustrate people who know Skyrim really well. So I'm hoping it's going to sit in a happy place where it satisfies everyone, but it's equally likely it could end up being in an annoying place where I annoy the experts I don't know it well enough, and I annoy the people who are new to it, because it's not kind of all brand new to my eyes. So I'm hoping that will work. I mean, I think it'll definitely get more views than Mass Effect 2, sure, but like, I'm just hoping it's going to be a really good series, and I really want it to be. But, the way I do things where, like, I often record for like a few hours and I'll edit it down to something tighter, even if Skyrim is a relatively kind of quiet game where there's lots of moments where not a huge amount is happening, I can just cut all that out. So I think it will be a pretty solid series. And then, of course, New Vegas Survival. Well, this is interesting. New Vegas Survival is coming to an end in not that many weeks away, but that depends what I decide to do with New Vegas Survival after it's done. Because, of course, I haven't yet done Lonesome Road or Dead Money. And I don't actually want to just go and do those now, because I think they'd just be too easy. It would just basically be just like a little walkthrough that'd be very, very casual. What I'm kind of curious is, I want to look at Fallout 4 Nuka World and how that does in terms of like doing a level 1 challenge. Because if people seem interested in that, and I might kind of leave it like a couple of weeks to see how like the first few parts are, if that works really, really well, I might go straight from New Vegas Survival's current playthrough into doing something similar with a new character in New Vegas. Because New Vegas, of course, like, as everyone's aware in New Vegas, because the annoying radio signals and little pop-ups telling you about your level cap being raised pop up the moment you start a new character and you step outside of Doc Mitchell's house. There's no level caps. Like, there's level recommendations for Fallout New Vegas, but there's nothing to stop you just going up to it and ignoring the level recommendation. So you can pretty much just run straight to Lonesome Road at level 1. You can try and do Lonesome Road at level 1, and I'm pretty sure you can do the same for Dead Money. I think you can just run straight to the Brothers Steel bunker, albeit it's a little bit further away, at level 1, and just get taken straight into Dead Money. Though to my mind, that one's probably more just frustrating, so I don't know if that would necessarily be worthwhile, but I wouldn't mind trying to do a level 1 Lonesome Road run. I'm curious to see how people respond to the Nuka World level 1 run. If it does, if people like it and find it exciting and interesting, I might go from my current survival mode in New Vegas straight into Lonesome Road level 1. Because Lonesome Road is interesting, which is it's very, very difficult as far as there's lots of kind of really interesting, tough, hard-hitting enemies, but there's also lots of really good armour and weaponry. So, I don't know, I think it just might be quite an interesting experiment, interesting way to kind of breathe some new life and tension into Lonesome Road, because, like, the game makes a big deal of, oh, bring your guns, and bring your armour, and bring your flag, whatever flag you follow now, or whatever it is Ulysses says in the trailer, something like that. But, like, if you do actually just bring your own guns, then it's too easy just to murder everything. So I think it'd be much more entertaining if you didn't bring your own guns, and you had to make do with the ones out there, of which there are some pretty darn good ones. I just think it might be a fun series. So, not a long series. Lonesome Road isn't like a desperately long DLC, but it's kind of that, or looking at the original Fallout, as I've discussed before. Like, at some point very soon, we're going to go and look at the original Fallout. And again, that's a big question. Like, I don't know how people are going to respond to Nuka World level 1. I don't know how people are going to respond to Skyrim. And I don't know how people are going to respond to the original Fallout. Especially as the original Fallout is not one I know well. As I've said before, I really fell into the Fallout franchise in Fallout 3. That was the one I really fell in love with. Like, I've played Fallout, the original, before, but I barely remember it, and I know, like, nothing about it. So I don't know whether that's going to be, like, really frustrating for people, or if on the contrary, because I think a lot of people who are on my channel and kind of watch Fallout on the stuff I've done probably are the same sort of experience as me, which is they may well have fallen in love with Fallout 3 and New Vegas and not necessarily played much of the originals, or maybe not played the originals at all. So possibly they might enjoy going on that journey of discovery with me. I don't know. It's big questions for kind of February and then going into March, because those are 3 big changes to the channel schedule, and I really hope they work out, because I'm genuinely not sure whether they're going to. So I sort of kind of hope that they do. Oh, big thing I want to do this month, by the way, that you can help me with. I'm aware from a few people pointing it out, and I was kind of conceptually aware of it anyway. We do sometimes, like, get some questions showing up, like, every few months, because obviously, you know, new people join the Patreon, and they ask questions, not realizing they've come up before. I want to make an FAQ, that then, during, like, every submission thing, I can link to the FAQ, and just keep that updated, so that, like, the most commonly asked questions don't come up regularly. If you've seen any questions being asked or me answering them on like more than one occasion, can you let me know in the comments below either this video on YouTube or the actual kind of post I put up on Patreon? I'll see both of them, like letting me know which questions those are, and I'll put those into a Patreon FAQ that I'll link to in every submission thing going forward, which should reduce the number of repeated questions, so hopefully therefore this will be a more enjoyable experience for those of you who have been around for longer. Oh, and incidentally, anyone who's new this month, which, as I say, hopefully will be at least a few people, I'll put a playlist down below as well, which is the entirety of every episode of the Patroncast of all time. So if you happen to enjoy listening to this Patroncast, then there's plenty of old ones for you to go through as well, if that's your thing. Oh, and the other big thing, of course, is, as I kind of mentioned in the other video that went out today about Patreon on the main channel, I've still been looking at the question of potentially hiring someone to help me out with the editing and all of that stuff. Thank you, by the way. I think actually a couple of Patreon people actually sent me applications. I haven't actually written back to all of you yet. Everyone who's written to me will get a proper reply with proper feedback and whatever. I'm looking at a few options right now. Like, some people I know elsewhere in the YouTube community have recommended a couple of kind of potentials to me. I've been speaking to a few people. I've actually also been speaking to Claire as well. Because Claire has the interesting kind of experience that Claire, obviously, you know, she knows the channel and she's known the channel from the very beginning. She's literally been here from the start. She has the advantage of, I think she understands, the way videos are supposed to be and the way they're supposed to be edited and, the tone of voice, the channel and all that. I think she understands all that and how I edit videos. She understands how I edit videos because she's literally seen me edit plenty of videos in the past. And I've been letting her kind of edit a couple of videos just to see how she does, which is interesting because actually no one noticed, which is a very, very good sign indeed. I gave her the Expeditions Viking video. The first part of that, she edited. And I don't think a single person in the comments actually kind of noted, anything weird about the editing, which was kind of good. So I've given her a couple of other little things to do. So spotted over the next few weeks, there's going to be a few videos mixed in from Claire, and if all of those basically no one really spots them, that will probably actually look pretty good potentially as an interim solution. So I might bring Claire on board. For now, we'll see. That's kind of to be decided. I'm speaking to a few other people as well, so we'll kind of see how all of that goes. Anyway, on to the questions, which I shall go through in no particular order, but I think I've arranged them by oldest to newest. What's next in Rome Total War? New game, new faction, how many parts remain? No idea how many parts remain. I literally have no idea how long that campaign is going to go on for. I can't imagine it going past, say, I don't know, 40 or 50 or something. So, given it's going through 3 parts a week, that's probably going to be got through actually pretty darn quickly. As for what's next after that, I'll probably dip into Medieval 2 Total War, which I know maybe not quite as well as Rome Total War, but I still know really, really bloody well. After that, maybe we'll also have a look to see at the Rome Total War DLC, in particular Barbarian Invasion, which is amazing, and Medieval 2's Britannia expansion, which again is really, really damn good. Then maybe we'll have a look at Rome 2. Maybe I'll even look at the kind of the black sheep people don't generally like that much. Empire Total War. Never actually played that one for more than a few minutes, so might look at that at some point too. John, have you ever seen the movie Hitman Agent 47? What was your opinion? Was that the first one or the second one? Because they made one ages ago that was terrible, and then they recently rebooted it. And I can't remember which one's which. I haven't seen the rebooted one. I saw the original one, and that was awful. Truly, truly, truly terrible. So as a result, I didn't watch the one that came later. Because, the kind of the core is, like, when you're making a Hitman film, 47's got to look right. And both of them, he doesn't look right, because he looks like he's wearing a really terrible, fake, kind of bold scalp covering thing. He just doesn't look bold at all, which kind of feels like a real prerequisite, like, you've got to get 47 right. But in both cases, they've kind of cast someone who doesn't look like, in terms of, like, the face, or even just, like, the boldness, like, much like 47, which always felt like a barrier to me. Have you ever played any of the games in the Kingdom Hearts series? Actually, no. I never have, but with them coming over to PS4, yes, I may indeed have a little look-see when they arrive. Why did I drop mods from the Jay Sawyer series? The thing was, well, it wasn't really so much like I meant to, it's just I kind of, like, I went around looking for a few mods, and, like, I kept finding interesting ones, and then eventually I just kind of worked my way through them, and at that point I would have just been adding in more mods for the sake of it, and, like, the series was always, like, equal parts adding in mods as I went along, but I kind of just wanted to add in mods subtly, just to make it like the same experience, just a bit prettier, and I kind of got it to where I wanted it to be, so I didn't really kind of feel like there was much point adding more stuff just for its own sake. Like, it was more for me about, like, showing off all the stuff in New Vegas that's, like, hidden away and how elegant it is, and, like, all the relatively well-hidden paths that maybe some people haven't seen before. It was more about that for me than anything else. John, you showed a keen interest about ancient Roman times, both good and bad. You also read fiction or watch movies or TV shows that are set in that period. I really enjoy the books of Robert Harris. He writes some really fun stuff set in the Roman times in terms of, like, fictional, kind of, like, semi-fictionalized accounts of historical events, which is really good. He wrote Imperium, didn't he? I think that was Robert Harris, if I'm remembering correctly. If that was Robert Harris, that was a really, really fun book about the life of Cicero. I love books, fictionalized accounts of the life of Cicero and stuff. That was really, really damn good. And as for TV shows, I have a real fondness and a real soft spot for the old HBO Rome series that had 2 seasons. Second season was maybe a little bit weaker, albeit it did nicely clearly have a bigger budget because they could actually, you know, show some of the actual fights. Whereas in the original series of Rome, like, whenever there was a massive world-changing battle, they kind of just cut away from it, and then, you know, they just cut to some people lying in the ground groaning because they didn't really have the money to do the actual battles, which was kind of a shame. But I really liked that. I thought it was actually quite good. It was quite fun. I mean, it was just kind of, you know, ridiculous excuse to have nothing but blood, boobs, blood, boobs. But, like, you know, the actual history that was happening behind the boobs and the blood that most people probably didn't notice was actually, though they took a couple of ridiculous liberties, for the most part it was actually pretty good. Why don't you make a playlist of all the non-series videos so more people can see the old stuff? Fun fact, I'm planning to do something kind of like that with manyatruenerd.com when I actually get that sorted out, which is probably going to be one of those things that happens when I actually get someone on board to help me, because I just don't have time to sort out manyatruenerd.com properly. Once I've got that probably sorted out, like, I had this idea that, like, there was going to be, like, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet, but, like, there's going to be, like, the latest video is going to be flagged, like, on the homepage, and it was also just going to, like, every week change over to, like, an old one-off video that normally people have seen, but one of the ones that I think kind of stacks up really well today, and just kind of highlight that, so a few people might get to see that. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about dealing with, like, the old one-offs. But you're right, I think there's, like, a bunch of really interesting one-offs that maybe not so many people have seen that I don't really kind of ever flag. So I'd like to use manyatruenerd.com to maybe kind of flag a few of those occasionally. How many videos don't actually make it onto the channel on average in a week? Depends what you mean by don't make it on. Like, for the most part, like, the amount of videos I'm making is about equal to the amount of videos that go out in a week. I try and stay about a week ahead, but I can't always. But, like, overwhelmingly, like, 99% of videos I make do make it onto the channel. It's a very rare video that I look at when I'm done and I just think, I can't do anything with this. Like, the most recent one was it called Robot Arena 3? It was like one of those, like, robot building, kind of vaguely low-rent Robot Wars style-y games. I think it was one that that Dan had done over on Nerdcubed. And I tried playing that, but I just didn't get it, and, like, it wasn't, like, funny failure, it was just, like, I literally do not understand how the UI and the interface works. So, like, after, like, 40 minutes, I just thought this isn't working, I just stopped recording and deleted it. It just wasn't working in the slightest. So, like, that very rarely happens, to be honest. 99% of what I make does actually end up on the channel. Have you ever considered looking at the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion? Yes, I have that and Morrowind, though I'd probably have to, like, mod them pretty heavily before I even started, just they looked acceptable. Because, like, one thing that's really difficult to do is when you get into a series, like, at one point, going back to an earlier point in the series is really hard to do because you miss the stuff that you took for granted. Because generally, like, you know, games, especially when they take big technological leaps forward and there's many years between them, like, you get used to a certain quality of life insofar as, like, you know, basically how graphics work. Like, having, like, got into Total War, Rome Total War, I really struggled to go back and play the original Medieval 1 and Shogun 1. Like, I've tried going back and playing them, I just can't do it. It's not that I'm ideologically wedded to how exactly Rome does things, because, like, you know, I totally comfortably settled into Medieval 2, and then kind of, you know, dipped into Total War Warhammer recently, and both of those worked absolutely fine. It's just, like, having got used to how things should be in the template for a modern 3D Total War, I just couldn't go back to Medieval 1 and Shogun 1 anymore. Like, I just didn't enjoy them. I just found them too frustrating, because I was too used to how, like, in my mind, things should be. So I'm worried that if I went back to Oblivion and Morrowind, I might feel the same way, because my first and basically only big experience with Elder Scrolls is Skyrim. If I were to mod it so it kind of looked still respectable, I imagine I'd have a good time. We're going to see, actually. Like, if Skyrim goes well, there's a very good chance I'll move straight on into Morrowind or Oblivion. Maybe I'll even put that up to a vote. Have you ever considered playing Baldur's Gate 2? Actually, when I first moved down to London many years ago, and I was living with a flatmate, she was super into Baldur's Gate 2, so I played a bit of Baldur's Gate 2 with her at the time. Maybe at some point I'll actually invite her over and we can do a kind of nostalgic reminiscing about Baldur's Gate 2. That might be fun, yeah. With regards to Fallout 4 YOLO, how are you going to deal with clothing that modifies endurance and therefore hit points, as well as the fact that total hit points increases as you level? Pretty simple. The rules for You Only Live Once have always been the amount of hit points that you've lost remains consistent. So therefore, if I increase my maximum hit points by leveling up or by increasing endurance, that just adds to my maximum hit points, and thus the amount that is deducted off that maximum hit points stays constant. Given the many hours you've put into Rome Total War, do you still find it challenging, and in what ways? Not hugely. Like, it is still challenging just because, well, you know, when you're on very hard, the computer does just cheat in Rome Total War. It just gifts your enemies, like, armies and money and whatever. So, like, it's still challenging in that regard. But to be honest, like, games aren't about challenge for me. Like, I've played plenty of games I don't find challenging. I don't, like, find challenge to be, like, an essential component of a game being fun. Like, I don't find Rome Total War, like, necessarily challenging all the time, but I still have a great time playing it. Like, some of my favourite battles in Rome Total War are just, like, getting loads of archers and just absolutely murdering huge armies of soft, squishy guys who walk towards me. That probably says something about my mental or moral character. I'm genuinely not sure. But for me, like, the fact it's not necessarily that challenging doesn't really bother me that much. Do you think it's time for a non-white or non-male doctor? I wouldn't mind a female doctor. You know, I think that would actually be, like, I don't see, like, potentially, like, a non-white doctor would make, like, much of a difference, because the Doctor's not human and alien anyway. So, like, I appreciate, like, when he's on Earth, it might make a difference to how people would respond to him, or what have you, and there might be some interesting stuff there. But, like, it doesn't feel like, from his point of view, it might make much of a difference. The Doctor has such now a history of being, like, an older guy who travels around with a young, attractive female, and there being, like, a vaguely flirtatious undertone to it. I think it would more interestingly mix up the kind of, like, you know, the status quo of Doctor Who if it was a woman, and therefore who that she might choose to travel around with. I just think that it might be a little bit more interesting in that regard. I think there's more interesting stuff you can mine out of a female Doctor than, like, a black male Doctor. Though I would have nothing against a black female Doctor. My favourite companion is indeed Martha Jones, and if the Doctor were to regenerate into her, I'd be thrilled. Suggestion for the vanishing of Ethan Carter. That's an interesting one. Admittedly, I always thought that was just a walking simulator. I mean, is there actually, like, much gameplay there? Because, like, the problem with walking simulators is, like, sometimes you can make a decent video out of them, but, like, there's not enough for me to play off of, really, to make a really solid video. Like, is there actually, like, proper gameplay in Vanishing of Ethan Carter? If there is, I might give it a look. But, like, yeah, if you could confirm that, if you happen to have played it, that would be useful to me. What do I think is the best ending for Far Harbor in Fallout 4? To be honest, I think it's actually blowing up the what's it called? The nucleus, the submarine. If you actually just blow that up, I think that's the right thing, because, like, every time we've run into the Children of Atom, whether it be Cromwell in Fallout 3 or, like, the guys in Fallout 4, like, pretty much all of them pretty much agree, hey, we want division, we want to be blown up in a nuclear explosion. That's what they want. That, for them, is, like, the moment of rapture. They're effectively an end-of-the-world cult, like, in multiple different ways, and that's what they want. So, like, if you can basically secure Far Harbor and make sure Far Harbor are safe, and also simultaneously kind of make sure that those guys get what they actually want and get them out of the picture in case they're dangerous, and probably make Dima... I prefer Dima to go and face Justice, but not the rest of Acadia. So Dima basically faces Justice in Far Harbor, the submarine gets blown up, and Acadia and Far Harbor live in peace with each other. I think that, to my mind, is actually the best ending. If they made a Total War Fallout game, how much of the rest of your life would be spent playing this game? Oh, I really hope they don't, because you're right, it would basically just eat my life and I'd convert the channel into doing nothing but that. I know you said you fell in love with Metal Gear. I did, and that was on the GameCube version, by the way. Twin Snakes on the GameCube, I just found abysmally bad. And as I understand it, like, even people who were quite fond of the franchise agreed, so maybe that wasn't the best representation of the series for me to get introduced to. Any chance of Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty or Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater? I've always heard really good things about Snake Eater. Like, people who seem like big on the franchise seem pretty keen on Snake Eater, so there's probably a pretty good chance that at some point we'll see that. And incidentally, can you also do the game over scene? Fine. Snake! 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 There, happy. Cat pictures! It's time we got to see the cat. It is! You're right. I have been woefully neglectful in letting you see the cat. So, I'm going to put, like, a couple of different cat pictures on screen right now. But, as you may be aware, like, I deliberately render this video in, like, really low resolution because it speeds up how fast I can render it, but the audio is still fine. So what I'm also going to do is, in the description below, I'm going to link to the full-size versions of those two pictures of Tabby, who is just snuggling on a bed in those two pictures. So, there you are, two exclusive pictures of Tabby, though, admittedly, she's kind of asleep because she was in a sleepy mode, and I didn't really want to poke her to wake her up. Do you have much or any experience playing tabletop or pencil and paper RPGs? No, really, it just wasn't really a thing when I was, well, it probably was a thing when I was a kid, but like, it was never something that I happened to encounter. But I've actually always thought that, like, if I could get the right setup and the right people to do it with, it might be really fun to, like, have my first experience doing tabletop pencil and paper RPGs actually on the channel. So I would like to do that at one point. Have you heard about the Roman reenactment events happening along Hadrian's Wall this summer, April through September, including on Saturday the 1st and Sunday the 2nd of July? One of the largest Roman cavalry reenactments ever seen in the UK will take place throughout the day. Ooh. You know what? I might just have to go and visit Carlisle as part of that. I'm actually going to add that to my calendar right now. After the success of my summer car videos, would you consider playing more of the obscure simulator type games out there? Yes, but simulators are a really interesting video type, because, like, if they need to be, like, spot on, they really need to be just the right point. Because, like, it's fun when they sort of break, but they can't be completely broken. And, like, there's got to be some actual gameplay to them. But, like, if the gameplay's too in-depth, then it's really, really boring. So they've got to be, like, accessible but also deep, and broken but still functional. And my summer car is just, like, in the perfect place to make really solid videos. Like, I think it could be, like, with a bit of polish, a really damn solid game. It wasn't really good enough to make it into my top 12 of the year, at the end of last year, but it's still a really, really interesting game, and, like, finding simulators that exist in that space is really difficult. Like, I've bought, like, you know, a big bundle of simulators off Bundle Stars at one point, and plenty of them are so shallow, it's really difficult to, like, get a good video out of them, because there's nothing to play off, because either they're really, really mundane, or they're just so broken, but in both cases, there's nothing I can make a good video out of, so it's very difficult to find a simulator I think makes an actual really good video. Like, I have a huge amount of respect for Dan at Nerdcubed, because, like, he can take even the worst simulators and make something really entertaining out of them, and that's a really rare, difficult skill for a YouTuber. I need something a little bit more that I can actually work with to make a really damn solid simulator video. I know you want to do something different out of Mass Effect 2. I'm pretty sure you said Skyrim. That is correct. It will almost certainly be Skyrim. Would you consider going straight into Mass Effect 3? Honestly, no, because one, I wouldn't have time to squeeze it in before Mass Effect Andromeda anyway, and two, like, Mass Effect 2, while it's been, like, okay in terms of, like, the number of views it's got, like, it's not been spectacular. Like, I will definitely do something in honor of Mass Effect 3, like, in the week or two before Mass Effect Andromeda comes out, but, like, I'm not going to be able to squeeze in a full series, and I don't think it would necessarily be the right thing to jump straight from that game on anyway. I think it could do with a rest anyway, to be honest, but I'll certainly kind of do something for Mass Effect 3 before Andromeda comes out. Will you be doing or planning to do any videos that are similar to Mr. Shifty? Actually, yes, having played it, it did actually kind of put me in the mind to go and actually try out Hotline Miami, because, like, I've seen Hotline Miami being played, and I have played it very briefly in the past, but I never made a video of it, and I've never really put much in the way of time into it, so I would at some point like to go back to the original Hotline Miami. As I understand it, the second one isn't anywhere near as good, so I'll probably go back to the original at some point, and yeah, there's a very good chance you'll see a video of that in the coming few months. Is there a game you'd like to play or have played that you wouldn't want to put on the channel due to a lack of entertainment value? I wouldn't say it's because of a lack of entertainment value, but there's one game that I love that I just don't know if I'll ever make a series of, which is Skies of Arcadia. And that is because it's relatively a very slow game. It's all about the story, to be honest. It's very much a game all about the story. The gameplay is, I think, really good, but I think most people would find it a little bit on the data side. It's a very old-fashioned, fairly simple RPG. The soundtrack's amazing, the narrative is amazing. But I'm not sure if it would work on the channel. Also, there's a cast of like, well, there's a cast of hundreds and like of main characters in like the high tens. And there's no voice acting in it because it was a Dreamcast game, so there was no voice acting. It's all done with text. But like, there's some very distinctive characters. So I'd need to voice act like 50 distinct characters, often with large group scenes, which is really, really difficult to do a good job with. Like, I really enjoy just like messing around with the voice acting stuff, which is why I love doing the visual novel stuff. But like, that's such a big ask, combined with the fact that I don't even know if it would work. Like, at some point I might just do like the first act, like the opening of the game, and when you first go into the bad guy's lair and then you escape again and diddly diddly dee. There's like a bit that I kind of consider like the first act of the game before the game proper kicks off. I might just do that and then see how that goes and then leave it open to do the rest of the game, but I don't think that's going to happen soon. It's just like, it's one of those games I really love, but I don't know if like it's even possible to make really, really good videos out of it. Are you worried about Mass Effect Andromeda with the lack of gameplay videos out? No, because I think from what we have seen, they're kind of bringing it into a direction I actually like, which is, one, it feels like the planets are a bit more big and a bit more open. It feels like there's a bit more role-playing, the conversation system where there's like interrupts that are like dynamic. I like how that all fits together. I'm not 100% on the new kind of upgrade system where you kind of change between classes you want, but I like the fact that it means like you can take your character in a direction that you want. I like the fact that it looks like the battlefields are opens a lot of mobility. Like Mass Effect 2, there was an awful lot of chest-high wall stuff going on there for the majority of the classes, whereas it feels like for Mass Effect Andromeda, there's loads of like open spaces, and like because anyone can have like things like the Bartic charge ability and jetpacking around or whatever, it feels like there's a lot more kind of mobility in the battlefield, which I do quite like, especially as like, you know, we've seen like the shields and the close range weapons and stuff like that. It just feels to me like it's going to be a more mobile game. Hey John, what's your favourite Muppet? Why would you even ask what my favourite Muppet movie is? You know it's a Muppet Christmas Carol because that's objectively the best one, for goodness sake. And I have always been rather fond of Kermit as well. In the case of Fallout New Vegas, why did you mention Gojira? Say that you could bring it into the game with console commands and then showcase an entire family of Deathclaws without releasing Gojira. That is a really good point. Well, I now know how that series is ending. Thank you very much. Has anything happened with the new difficulty you were thinking of modding into Fallout 4? I really like some of your ideas. This is something that came up ages ago that some of you may not remember or weren't around for. I've kind of been playing with the idea of like creating my own mod, which is like not just a difficulty mod, but a bit of a rebalance mod for Fallout 4, and like I don't know whether I'd actually make a series out of it or whether I'd just release it, just because I kind of like the idea of like rebalancing a bit, because I really feel like even survival mode, though survival mode is a step in the right direction, I feel like especially in the mid to late game it doesn't quite go far enough, and I had a few ideas for how I might rebalance the game myself, and I hope I've got like enough hours in the game that like my opinions on how to rebalance Fallout 4 wouldn't be utter garbage. So at some point, ideally, again, this might be when I've actually got someone to help me out and I've got a bit more time for this sort of thing, I might look at that over the coming months. But yeah, I would actually like to get that done. I don't have a specific question, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on the current political climate, both in the US and the UK in more detail. The closest thing I could think of as a question is there anything we can do to change the way we're currently heading? This is one of those things where the pendulum just has to swing occasionally. Like, you know, a bunch of people will come in and they'll say, I've got all these new ideas and they're going to solve everything. And the thing is, if it was that easy to just come in and solve everything, someone would have already done it. So that person's going to come in and they're going to fail and everyone's going to hate them because they broke their promise, and then the pendulum will swing the other way and someone on the other side of the political spectrum will say, no, I've got a good new idea that will solve everything, and they'll come in and, like, you know, they'll fail, and there'll probably be some sensible people in the middle saying, well, I can't actually solve your problems, but through a long-term series of very small boring things over the next 20 years I might be able to alleviate, and those people will never get into power because they're not willing to lie ridiculously about how they can solve the problem in only 4 years. Will you be trying out the enhanced texture pack Bethesda is releasing for Fallout 4? Absolutely. In fact, I can't remember whether I even had a release date. If there is, I should add that to my calendar, but I genuinely can't remember. Do you like LEGO as much as Dan and Matt? Honestly, no. Like, I conceptually love LEGO. Like, I had loads of LEGO when I was a kid, but, like, I don't really have any LEGO, like, these days. Like, when I get LEGO and stuff for, like, my nieces and nephews, I do enjoy building it with them when I go and hang out with those guys. But, like, I don't have any that, like, I would get just for myself. Like, just because, not because I've got anything against it, it's just, it's very expensive for something I'm not, like, super into. What do you think of the Tale of Two Wastelands mod? I've never actually used it myself. Okay, that's a lie. I've used it very, very briefly at one point just to check, like, how it ran. Like, I think it's really, really interesting. I think it's very, very cool. Just the thing is, like, I'll probably never make a series out of it because, like, on its own, it would be too similar to stuff I've already done, so there wouldn't be any point. So it's unlikely to really ever be seen on the channel, but I do think it's really, really cool. That's definitely true. John, have you ever thought about doing a series of how-to short videos on games like Rome Total War? I kind of have, but I feel like it's not really my thing. Like, you know, the videos I make that I'm most comfortable with are like the heavily edited, like, long-form Let's Play stuff, or the really heavily edited, like, shorter form one-off stuff. Like, I feel like I don't necessarily do the best, like, guides. I think it's a very different sort of thing. Like, when I was originally planning to do Rome Total War, I was planning to do it as more of a guide. It was going to be, like a really brief series on, like, how to make the optimal opening moves for each of the Roman factions. That was planning to be the thing. But, like, that's kind of what I have been doing. It's just I've been doing it as a longer series, so... Like, I have thought about it, I feel like I'm more comfortable with, like, what Rome Total War is now than doing that sort of thing. But, you know, never say never, maybe I'll do something like that in the future. Do you know when the podcast will be back? Oh, I've got bad news for you, the podcast's dead. That was Dan's executive decision. It lives on NerdCube, so he gets the say on that sort of thing. The podcast is definitely dead, because Dan wanted to do something that actually had gameplay in it, so... You know, give NerdCubed Online, the new stuff that we did this first time with the Megalodon on Wednesday, a chance. Like, I think it was, the first one was a little bit on the scruffy side, because it was the first one we did, but the first podcast was really scruffy as well. So, like, it's going to be a new thing like that, and it'll take some time to find its feet. So, podcast is definitely dead, unfortunately. But, yeah, we are doing something new in its place that is currently happening, at least for a little bit. Have you ever considered playing Telltale's Back to the Future? To be honest, no, because, like... The story narrative stuff generally doesn't do very well on the channel. Like, Telltale's stuff doesn't in general do very well. Like, I was expecting Telltale's Batman to do better than it did. But Telltale's Batman got, like, really, really small numbers of views. People just didn't seem particularly keen on it. In many ways, like, I'm not actually a big fan of Telltale games. Like, I find them fun while I'm playing them, but, like, after I've played them, I always look back and feel more disappointed afterwards than when I was playing them, because, like, once you're done with them, like, it's really obvious, especially if you go back and play them a second time and try and make all the opposite choices. Like, you realise how stupidly limited they are next to how much you think they are. Like, all the freedom is entirely an illusion. Like, you don't really have any choice whatsoever. Everything just feels, like, so fake. Because, like, no matter what you do, aside from, like, some superficial changes to which characters where, when, everything always goes exactly the same way, which is obviously, like, how it has to be, but it's so ridiculous. Like, when it's split up into 5 episodes, and those episodes, like, go on such big, amazing journeys, and the choices are portrayed as so big and epic and important, that, like, pretty much the 5 episodes have to be identical. So, like, despite these big, world-changing decisions you're making, like, obviously, like, all the choices still have to all blend, so, like, you know, nothing you can do ever lets you actually get away from the one path you're on, so... I'm just not, like, a massive fan of Telltale games, to be honest. Like, they bug me how there's not actual proper significant choices. And I understand why that has to be. It just feels like Telltale's thing, like, while the cliffhangers work for episodic gaming and make big choices and choices having consequence doesn't really suit episodic, because the game constantly has to reconverge at those points where the next episode begins again, and that's why I think it's better for have choice and consequence in a big open game where it's just one big game, because then you can have the plot spiraling off if you want to, and, like, completely rule out one bit of the game and go down another bit that you're unlocking, and just, like, completely not have huge parts of the game visited, like you can in New Vegas, for example, which I think is the right way to do choice and consequence. I just don't think Telltale does it very well. Rome Total War is also one of my favourite games of all time. My other is Caesar 3. Would love to see you play that. I've actually been thinking, by the way, like, if there'd be a good other ancient warfare style game I could bring in, whether that be, like, what's it called? Is there the, Imperium series? I think there's a game series called Imperium, and then there's Hegemony, and Hegemony 3 seems to be quite a good one, and then you've got the C series. Like, there's a few series, like, if you've, like, got much experience playing, like, Rome or Greek era strategy games, let me know which you think are the best. Because, like, I will totally take a look at, like, the ones that kind of get recommended, and, like, at some point we might see them. The only difficulty is, like, now Total War is, like, clearly hugely popular and loads of people love Total War. Like, Total War is, like, doing better than Fallout 4 and almost as well as Fallout New Vegas. Like, it's almost the biggest series on the channel right now, which is crazy, because it's relatively much easier to make than Fallout New Vegas is or Fallout 4 is. I can make it much faster. There's just a huge number of comments from people specifically, like, admitting they're completely addicted to it. So, yeah, fitting that in might be difficult, because after Rome Total War is done, we might just move straight over to the next Total War, but certainly recommend it, and I will definitely give it a look at some point. How many emails do I get on a weekly basis? A few hundred in terms of direct emails, probably like 100 DMs through Twitter or Reddit, and then like about 10,000 comments. I think it's about 10,000 comments a month. Which I do think I still get through pretty well, but you're right, it doesn't mean I can't reply to as much. I think I do keep up with just about everything. My inbox is a little bit full at the moment. I've got 184 unread emails in my inbox, and those aren't just like, the top 184. It goes back to stuff I've just been saying aside of, oh yeah, I need to remember to like have a look at that and see whether I want to do it or not, and instead it just falls off the first page of Gmail and then gets forgotten about till I remember it and come back to it later. So yes, I guess the answer to your question is yes, sometimes I do fail to keep up with all of my email. How long do you think it will take VR to catch up with consoles and other home entertainment systems, if ever? I'm not sure it'll ever become like as popular as console. I think it'll always remain a bit of a niche thing, but like I think it will certainly kind of slowly penetrate. But I always think it will just be like a nice to have rather, or at least in its current form, it'll just be nice to have, because like VR it's very expensive. It's a faff to set up, and it's more experiential than it is about actual really kind of like solid games at the moment. Like, you're willing to overlook a lot of dross in VR because just the experience of it is incredible. It's just an incredible experience to be in. So a lot of the games that come out are probably absolute utter garbage, and like, the best games in VR are probably just mediocre games, whereas if you took them out of VR, people probably call them out as pretty mediocre. But actually, like, within VR, they're amazing. Like VR Golf Club, or Golf Club VR, whatever it was called, I mean, that would be absolute garbage on computer, but in VR it's incredible and such good fun. So like, I think there's like a real difference in like how people experience and evaluate VR games. And the thing about that is, because the games are relatively kind of generally quite poor and quite shallow, if in terms of like objective quality next to home console games, like, you don't want to play VR for that long. Like, the games tend to be quite small and repetitive, so you just want to kind of dabble into them. Plus, right now, say the Vive, the headset is not the lightest thing in the world, so you can only play for so long. Your eyes start to hurt, you'll eventually get a headache, you'll eventually just want to sit down, you'll get sick of having a very sweaty forehead from having the kit kind of pressed against your forehead for a while. Like, you only want to play for like an hour or two tops. So like, I don't know, like, in its current form, I don't think it's going to kind of get a huge mass acceptance for quite a while. But in the medium term, like, if someone could just make it cheaper and easier to just like set up and just kind of tinker with a bit, I can imagine potentially it could become a big thing. If there actually is a Fallout New Vegas 2, and incidentally I don't believe there is a Fallout New Vegas 2, I'm not willing to believe it, I've been hurt too many times before, would you actually want it to be in New Vegas, or would you prefer something different geographically? I'd probably prefer something different geographically. It would be nice to explore a different part of the world, maybe not even America, maybe somewhere in Canada, or maybe down in Mexico or something. That might be kind of fun. Ooh, maybe even like Cuba. Cuba might be fun. If we could go to post-apocalyptic Cuba, that might be fun indeed. I wouldn't mind it being in New Vegas again, like, as long as like it wasn't too built around nostalgia and, hey, do you remember this thing from New Vegas 1? Do you remember this? This is that now, but now it's in the future. Hey, like, because that would be a bit disappointing. Because then, especially as like, even if they redesign the map, like, you'd have a vague idea of the shape of the map, and you'd know what to expect where, so you wouldn't have the joy of discovery, because, like, you'd know if you were told to go to this mysterious settlement up in the mountains, you'd know it's going to be the Jacob's Town of the future, so it would kind of lose some of that magic of discovering it. So, I'd like something new, because then we'd have the joy of discovery, which is kind of, for me, like, one of the big things of Fallout, particularly the more kind of, like, West Coast advanced Obsidian style Fallout, where it's less about lonely desperation and more about kind of exploration and discovery and rebuilding. So to my mind, like, I think it would be potentially weakened by being set in New Vegas again. Couple of suggestions: Pillars of Eternity and Sherlock Holmes Crime and Punishment. Both vaguely on my radar, but not happening imminently, I'm afraid. For the moment, at least, I'm a little bit on the booked up side. Though I have heard excellent things about the Sherlock Holmes series and Pillars of Eternity, so I imagine I'll get to them at some point or other. I'd like to hear you talk a bit more about the moral implications a good character faces when completing Home Sweet Home in Nuka World. It's a rare if not unique example of when a main Fallout quest actually forces the player to do a significant string of activities that are evil. I think it's interesting, but I'm not sure how much of it's accidental. Like, if we're willing to think very positively of Bethesda, then what we can say is it's a really fascinating, like, subversion of what we typically expect, which is, in Fallout, we expect to be able to do things all the good way, and if we follow the quests and we're goody two-shoes, then we get the good ending. Whereas in Nuka World, it's kind of flipped on its head. You get more gameplay and more missions and more script and more story if you do the evil thing, whereas the good thing is relatively short and unsatisfying. That's a really interesting way to tempt good characters to do evil stuff. And it's also an interesting subversion of how generally DLC goes, where the evil characters can just go in and start murdering things to get simple resolutions, whereas the good characters have to go through huge numbers of quests in order to actually sort things out, but then they can get, like, arguably the more satisfying resolution. So it kind of takes the normal Fallout DLC morality and way of doing things and inverts it. Or, alternatively, if we were feeling less generous with Bethesda, we might just say they designed the quest like that and then realised there probably ought to be an alternative for people who want to do it the good way, and they just kind of stuck open season on as an afterthought, which arguably is potentially a little bit more likely. But, you know, if we want to think the best of Bethesda, there could be some really interesting morality stuff going on there. Would I ever set up increased difficulty mods for either Rome Total War or Rome 2 when I get round to it? Honestly, no. Rome 1 I don't want to, because, like, Rome 1, like, on very hard, the game's already cheating pretty damn hard. I don't kind of see much entertainment out of just making it kind of any more difficult just for its own sake. For Rome 2, because I've never played Rome 2 before, I definitely wouldn't go for a challenge run straight away. I'd just go in and enjoy that. I'd probably put it on, like, hard by default. That's generally my default settings for playing Total War anyway. Very hard I'm doing on this occasion, just 'cause I kind of want to show it off. But very hard, like, the computer cheating is just too obvious. I find hard is, like, to my mind, like, you don't notice the computer cheating as much, but it's still at least a bit of a challenge. Have you ever read Codex Alera by Jim Butcher? Could be interesting, as it's a book based on joining the concepts of the Lost Roman Legion and Pokemon. Okay, I've never read that book and know anything about it, but I know what's just been added to my reading list. What are your chances of becoming many a true Nord in Skyrim? As much as I would love the pun, sadly non-existent. I don't really like the Nords as a character class. I'll almost certainly be a Breton because I like their magical resistances. Have you ever considered making a mini-series or a one-off for any sports games, FIFA, Madden, etc.? Yes, actually, I requested review code for FIFA 17, but I was never sent it by EA, the bastards. So at some point I would love to do just like a little one-off. I'm vaguely thinking about doing like one of the football managers, like Championship Manager 2017 or whatever. I would not mind doing that at all. I think that actually might be quite fun, you're right. So I am planning to do a one-off for that at some point or other. How realistic are the population numbers in Rome? It always sounds weird that towns with a few thousand people are controlling multiple nations' worth of land. Now, I've actually put thought into this before, so I'm really glad this came up. So, in towns in Rome Total War, generally the population settles at, like, you know, when it gets to 24,000, that's, like, the threshold for the biggest city. And depending on, like, how big a town can be is kind of about, like, how good farmland there is. Like, generally it caps out at somewhere, like, 50,000 or something. That's kind of how high it caps if you like had like all the farming upgrades, really high base farming level, and you invested really heavily in like sanitation. You could get to maybe like 50,000 or something like that. Now, that doesn't make sense insofar as actual population. So say, let's talk about like ancient Athens. So population of ancient Athens is a few 100,000. But the thing is, in Rome Total War, the population, like the entirety of the population that you see, can be recruited into armies, because you can recruit the population right down to just the 400 base, below which you can't go. So that population doesn't include everyone. That population is just adult males who are eligible to serve in the armed forces. So it doesn't include women, it doesn't include children, it doesn't include the elderly and the infirm, it doesn't include the disabled. Presumably, therefore, it doesn't include slaves, because, you know, slaves can't just go and join the army whenever you need to. Slaves are busy being bloody slaves. They belong to someone, they're property. And all sorts of, like, non-citizens and people without voting rights aren't going to be included in that. If you kind of have a look at, like, the number of people in Athens, like I was saying, like, say, ancient Attica, few 100,000, but actual citizens, 100,000. Get that down to the population that's got, like, voting rights and basically, you know, filter out everyone who, for various reasons, isn't, like, proper. You get it down to mid-tens of thousands, which is about as many people as a Rome Total War city is allowed to contain, which is fascinating. The only one that's wrong is Rome, because we know Rome's population could cap at, like, 1 million in the ancient world, and that's simply just not represented in the game at all. Rome's population caps out, like, 50,000, same as everyone else's. What benefits you most on YouTube? Subscribers, views, view time, etc.? Honestly, we don't know, because we don't know what's going on back end in YouTube. We think view time is probably most important, because YouTube seems really keen on people with high view time. I mean, views directly generates ad revenue, so views is the most obvious one, but we think views are more likely to come to you if you've got high view time, but we genuinely don't actually know. If you ended up in the sole survivor's position and had to choose between the Brother of Steel, the Institute, or the Railroad, who would you choose? I'd probably always go for the Institute, to be honest, because I'd probably just go for the creature comfort, and I'd just be kind of seduced by the idea of science and technology and the Enlightenment over let's smash people with power armor, or let's start freeing robots because they've got to have rights or something. I'd almost certainly be seduced by the Institute and the idea of science being the true and pure course, because that vaguely appeals to me. What's the hardest moral decision I've ever faced in a game? Not a moral decision, but the hardest decision I've had to face in a game was the original playfile I did for Mass Effect. Because in Mass Effect 1, I romanced Liara, because I was playing as Melchap, so Kaidan wasn't allowed to be gay back then, so your choice was only Liara versus Ashley, and Ashley was a racist dick and I hated her, so I ended up romancing Liara, because Liara was cool and she was an archaeologist and that was amazing. So I ended up with Liara in Mass Effect 1. Then Mass Effect 2, she kind of went off the rails, and I went out with Tali instead, so I was romancing Tali in Mass Effect 2, and I was convinced in Mass Effect 3 I was just going to stick with Tali. That was absolutely fine. Then in Mass Effect 3, and this was the very first time I played this was like literally the first time I'd got it out of the box and played it. This was on Xbox 360, because I played for it on the Xbox 360 versions. So I just got out of the box, and like, you know, you escape Earth in Mass Effect 3, and then you go to Mars and you join it with Liara, and Liara's there. So you've run into Liara before you've run into Tali, and Liara is no longer mad. She's no longer kind of the psychopath she was kind of heading in the direction of in Mass Effect 2. She's pretty much back to how she was in Mass Effect 1. She's intelligent, she's doing archaeologist stuff, she's, you know, friendly and lovely, and she just kind of ambushes you halfway through the mission with, is there still anything between us? And like, I stopped. I just stopped and I just couldn't play the game anymore. I needed to walk away and make a cup of tea because I'd been so sure I was going to stick with Tali, and then Liara was just like, do you want to get back together? It's like, oh god, no, I wasn't prepared for this. I was not. I literally had to step away from the computer for like half an hour until I could come back. I had to go and tell Claire about this because it was deeply traumatizing to me. But in the end, I decided to stick with Tali, and I'm very glad I did because Tali in Mass Effect 3 is wonderful. I'm travelling through Europe later this year with stops in Dubrovnik and Rome. Could you share any lesser-known must-see areas? I don't know much about Dubrovnik, to be honest, but I always recommend the water gardens of the Villa d'Este on the outskirts of Rome. It's close by to the Ostia area. Like, it's well worth getting a bus out to them. They're absolutely beautiful. Have you heard of Galactic Junk League? Will you play it on the channel? It's been flagged to me. I've seen it kind of like the review code floating around. I had a quick glance at it, but it didn't look like desperately interesting to me, to be honest. Like, if you've played it, let me know if it's like any good and worth a look, and then maybe I'll give it a look if so. Why Not Wednesday was one of my favourite series back when. Do you think it will ever return? Why Not Wednesday is interesting, because like, now kind of like all my one-offs are Why Not Wednesday, because like back in those days, like heavily edited one-offs were relatively rare, so I made them like a series, so they'd be a bit special. And I agree, some of my favourite videos in the history of the channel are in Why Not Wednesday, but like, these days, like, any random one-off, the sort of stuff that just kind of happens like every Saturday and every Tuesday, like, they're pretty much all Why Not Wednesdays, just not called Why Not Wednesdays anymore, because they're one-off games that are heavily edited. So it's kind of one of those series that kind of outlived any reason to exist, which is unfortunate. So like, I don't rule it out coming back at some point, like especially if I want to play something from like the Xbox 360 generation, which was kind of the original point of the series. But like, in some ways, like, what it represented and, like, the style of how I played and how I edited it is still just floating around. It's just in all of the one-off videos these days. How long is an average day for you between recording and editing and everything else? Do you actually get to sleep? I do, but you can put a reasonably educated guess into roughly how many hours I work, because I don't like to think about it too much, which is, the average video you see is probably taken between 2 and 3 hours to record. Then while my capture program's just chunking that over into an MP4, and then I'm loading it into my editing program, I'll nip out and grab just a bite to eat for lunch. I'll come back and then I'll edit it for another 2 to 3 hours or whatever, depending on how big an editing job it is. Then I need to render it, which takes my work computer out of commission while it's rendering, which takes a little bit of time too. Now, if you think that that's a single individual video is taking like, I don't know, between 4 and 6 hours, depending, plus rendering time, and then upload time, but that generally happens overnight, so I'm sleeping while that's happening, and I'm putting out 11, 12 videos a week. Like, if you do the maths, I think you start seeing, like, why I really need to, like, hire someone to take some of the load off. Because that many hours a week, like, you know, it's sustainable for now, but it is a lot of hours, which is why I think I do need a little bit of help. What are some eras in history you don't know very well, but are interested in? To be honest, it's the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which I don't actually know that much about. Like, when I studied classics, I was way more into Hellenic history, the history of Greece, Hellas is Greece in Greek. I was way more into Greek history and Greek literature, and the bits of, like, Roman history I studied were late Republican and early Imperial. Like, I don't know, aside from, like, a very high level knowledge, that much about the fall of the Western Roman Empire. I'm much better about the end of the Eastern Roman Empire and its kind of conversion over time to the Byzantines and all of that stuff. I'm a little bit better on that front. The fall and disintegration of the Western Empire is actually something I know embarrassingly little about for someone who's got a degree from classics from Oxford University. So yeah, at some point I should probably do some reading around that. Would I ask a genie to make Skies of Arcadia 2 if the price for it existing was you could never again play Fallout New Vegas? No, because Skies of Arcadia 2 might not be good, whereas I know Fallout New Vegas is wonderful and evergreen. Thing is, like, plenty of amazing games spawned sequels that are terrible. I love Advance Wars 2, but Advance Wars Dark Conflict, or Days of Ruin if you're in America, is utter garbage. Plenty of good games have bad sequels. Not a good deal. With the podcast dead, would you consider doing a podcast of your own that's more news-focused? I have thought about it. I genuinely have thought about it, and I thought, like, if I did, whether, you know, I could get Matt along and me and Matt could do something and we could invite some other guests and do a kind of a newsy thing. I genuinely don't know, to be honest. Like, I have thought about it, and it's something I'd probably give a go to at some point this year. I just don't know exactly when. Would you consider doing some videos on Yakuza 0? I wasn't planning to until you followed up that question by saying it's a cross between GTA and Deadly Premonition. So now I am, because you've just sold it to me, damn it. Would I consider taking a look at Hearts of Iron 4 for a strategy game? Honestly, it's pretty far down the list at the moment, because I also want to look at Crusader Kings 2 and Europa Universalis 4, and also a hell of a lot more Total War games. So I would love to look at Hearts of Iron 4. It's just kind of sadly stuck in a very long queue. Which NPC from a modern Fallout game do you think you're most like and why? I've always had a fondness and a level of kind of sympathy and empathy for Arcade Gannon, to be honest, because, like, many characters, when you run into them games, like, you feel like they reckon they're the protagonist of their own little story. Like, Boone is the protagonist of his own story, and Veronica is the protagonist of her own story. Arcade doesn't ever think he's the protagonist of his own story. Arcade is very open with the fact that he's just tagging along for the ride. Like, it's not about him. He might be able to help out in small ways, but he's not gonna go along and kind of change the world himself. He might know some people who can, who might be able to help out some people who can, he might be able to heal some people who can. But he doesn't feel like he's the protagonist. He doesn't feel like he's going to change the world. He can play a part, and he wants to do the right thing, but he also doesn't know what the right thing is. Like, he feels like he doesn't have the ability or necessarily the compulsion to want to do things by himself, and what he can do, he doesn't know if it's the right thing to do. He second-guesses himself a lot, and I like the fact that he's unsure what the right thing to do is, and he doesn't necessarily think that what he does makes him the hero of his own story. He feels like a very modest, intelligent individual, and I respect that an awful lot. Who is the most interesting of the Roman emperors? Claudius. Claudius was awesome because he did boring, uninteresting, unsexy stuff like investing in infrastructure, and none of the other emperors did it, and he got booed and hated for doing boring stuff, despite the fact it was really, really important and useful, and the other emperors did stupid, flashy stuff that nobody needed that ruins the empire, and everyone loved them for it, and it's really annoying. I love Claudius, he's great. Have you ever considered playing Populous the Beginning or other god simulators on the channel? Yes, actually. In fact, I have a very little known god game in mind that should be showing up probably within the next month. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it because it's a bit different, but I do actually have a god game coming very, very soon indeed. Which ancient writer would be the most likely to write the song Anything Goes for their time? What would the topics mentioned be? Oh, bloody hell. This is one hell of a specific question. Okay. So, Anything Goes, which is, so the theme of Anything Goes is, well, Anything Goes is an interesting song, because Anything Goes is technically all about how the world has changed very, very rapidly, but the song doesn't really specify whether it condemns or approves of those changes. And I'm trying to think, actually, within the musical itself, would the characters have been more or less in favour of the Anything Goes ethos? I don't know. Okay, I'm going to assume the song doesn't disapprove of Anything Goes. It's simply observing and is fine with the fact. In which case, we're dealing with a Philhellene, because the relevant Roman cultural phenomenon would be Greek culture flowing into Rome, and that would have made things change really, really quickly. So it's got to be someone who's kind of Philhellenic, and it would have to be one of the Roman comic authors, because they took Greek works and converted them. So literally, they'd be basically, one, it would be really bawdy, so anything would be going on stage, and it would be all about how the world was changing, because it literally would be taking Greek stuff and making it Romanized, but kind of, yeah, creating this kind of mix of Greek and Roman stuff. So the topics mentioned would presumably be things like, hang on, what will be a good example topic? Okay, not specifically about kind of Philhellene stuff or kind of Greek-Roman here, but for example, like a big topic that showed up in like the speeches of Cicero is about, say, in the attacks on Clodia, how Clodia took a large number of male lovers. And to be honest, that's probably not really a condemnation of the time. I don't think there's any evidence in the late Republican period like rich women were more likely to take many male lovers. It's just a long-standing slur that's been issued against women of standing in society. Okay, I tried, but I can't make a flipping verse work right. It would be something about Claudia getting drunk on cider and swimming in the Tiber, and then Jupiter knows anything goes. That's the best I can do right now. What do I consider to be the canonical ending to Fallout New Vegas? I've got to assume it's Mr. House. I always assume it is Mr. House, because, like, I don't think it should be the NCR, because if it is the NCR, then basically the NCR have just swept over, apparently, like, the entirety of the southwest of America, and presumably would just sweep up and take the North as well. Like, it makes the NCR too powerful, which is interesting, because, like, you know, if they've destroyed the Legion, then they're basically all the Legion lands are going to fall into the NCR hands really easily. And has Vegas, and they've already taken the West, so, like, it makes the NCR too powerful. I think they kind of need a check on their power to make them more interesting if we ever need to go back to them down the line. Meanwhile, I can't imagine that, like, the Legion winning is definitely the solution, because then, basically, the NCR will be destroyed down to the last man and burnt to the ground and razed. And I can't believe that's going to be true, because we're going to want the NCR back sooner or later anyway. So I feel like, therefore, it's probably going to be Mr. House, because Mr. House is interesting, because Mr. House doesn't really, like, have any expansionist plans, to be honest. Like, he just wants to hold New Vegas, make some money, and then eventually send some rockets out into space to go and found some new colony worlds. And that leaves the status quo a little bit more interesting, which is the NCR are in no position to pursue Caesar's Legion, so there's still going to be some lands in Legion control, it's just their power's been significantly dented. New Vegas stays independent and arguably can grow into something really interesting, because, like, you know, with Hauser's vision and everything set up in his favour, he can turn it into some ridiculously advanced techno wonderland, which will be fascinating to revisit. And the NCR's still present, but they've had their power checked a little bit, so potentially they're not going to be so expansive anymore. They're going to be thrown into political and military changes, which could be a really interesting place to go and visit. Have you ever considered putting up some Halo content on the channel? I did play Halo 5. There is a Halo 5 video. I wasn't a huge fan, and that didn't go down well with the people who did like Halo 5, so probably not, to be honest. Will there be a Knights of the Old Republic livestream? I imagine so at some point. I just need to double check that everything's fine. I mean, I'd love to do Knights of the Republic as a full series, to be honest. I just need to do some kind of research into how much, like, Disney, like, keep an eye on that sort of thing now, like the older Star Wars stuff. And, like, you know, whether it's likely to get, like, content matched or, like, even copyright strikes. I just need to double check, like, how safe it is. Any chance of more John Explains Tech, as that was some of the most entertaining content I've seen on YouTube so far. I kind of agree, and I was actually planning to do, like, a one-off video, like, doing, like, me explaining my understanding of how various bits of tech work, but I realised really quickly that, like, the joke kind of wore out really fast. So I kind of just had a little bit in Car Mechanic Simulator, but, like, it's kind of one of the interesting things about a joke, which is once you've got, like, a really good joke, you can't over-labour it. Like, you can't, like, drag it out too long, otherwise it just gets less and less funny, and it kind of ruins the original. So I think I agree, that was a really wonderful moment. That was just absolutely fantastic. It's probably one of my favourite moments in the whole of the podcast. May it rest in peace. But I don't think it would benefit from being stretched out further. Any chance of playing a wrestling game like Dan suggested? Probably yes. Like, I keep meaning to get around to it, but, like, I don't prioritise it because I just don't know anything about wrestling. And I feel like the people who don't follow wrestling won't get it either, and the people who do follow wrestling, potentially, like, are just going to be annoyed that I don't get it. So I feel like it might sit in the same uncomfortable place that Overwatch did. And finally, this might be a bit late, but what series did you enjoy making the most? Probably Stellaris, like, and I basically evaluate that by saying, like, the series that I presumably got far enough ahead in, because, like, I was so keen to keep playing it, would be the one I enjoyed making the most. Stellaris, I got so far in, like, Stellaris, like, even when the series was only half done, I'd already completed it, because I couldn't stand to wait. I was having so much fun role-playing as the Infinite Pond and its adventures and all its friends and its enemies and stuff. That I was just having so much fun playing that. It was a brilliant series to make. I think it's, like, one of the best series I ever made. Stellaris is fantastic. Just I couldn't stand to wait for the series to catch up. I just had to keep playing it. I'd have to say that would be Stellaris. And that is your lot for the questions. blimey, there's a lot of questions. And in fact, yes, that's probably why I want to do the FAQs, because I suspect there's a couple of duplicates from previous months in there, so I would like to actually get the FAQ set up so that we can kind of streamline it down to new questions, or mainly new questions anyway, because that way we will have more time to go into the interesting new stuff, and the people who are newer can get caught up on some of the classic answers we have already had. So that's that for now, ladies and gentlemen. If you are new, then kind of in late February, what I'll do is I'll put up a submission call on Patreon where you get to submit any questions that you would like, and then I will make the new Patroncast for the end of February, towards the end of February, though it very likely comes up at the beginning of March, because that's kind of a running joke. It's just a thing that happens. So that's that, ladies and gentlemen. And in the meantime, I've been Johnson. It's been many a true nut, and thank you all so very, very much for your ongoing support and for listening to me ramble on. Thank you very much, and goodbye.